Contentment came to me because one, I understood my passion and my purpose, and I was living it out, and I was making decisions based on that very solid foundation. But also it came when I consciously practiced gratitude. Otherwise stated for me, when I consciously controlled my thoughts, because I think human nature is to worry, is to think about the negative.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Orthopreneurs podcast. Today, we are very, very lucky to have Dr. Nicole Wax with us. And I'm going to let you all give her applause in just a second. But she is one of the guiding lights in our profession. She's somebody I respect a ton. She's spoken on the main stage at Orthopreneurs Summit, and we're just fortunate to have her here. So welcome, Nicole. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you. Well, I'm excited to have some conversation with you. It's been a while. I love what you do, and I think there's a lot to be learned from the various people that bring on. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks. You know, most recently, many of you might have seen her running down the street with her purse and a cup of coffee in hand, leading one of the best conversations I've seen in a long time. And I love the fact that you're such an outside-the-box thinker, Nicole. You know, maybe you don't view yourself that way, but I certainly see you as somebody who's obviously very busy, but we know lots of busy people. But you always seem to have your own take on things. You always seem to see things from a different angle. Do you see yourself that way? And if so, have you always been that way?
Ooh, that's a really great question. So I think that I have discovered or noticed that about me more in the last, maybe 5-10 years. Okay. Definitely not before the last 10 years when I was still a student, because remember, I started my practice right out of residency 10 years ago. We celebrate our decade of smiles this year. So
congratulations.
Thank you. I do recognize that now. I didn't then, because when you're young, you want to fit in, and if you stand out, it can be uncomfortable for you or other people. But I think that now, I think it's good to stand out, especially if it's in a positive, helpful way. So yeah, I do see that about myself. But really, I think what it is I'm a problem solver. I have really no interest in the why not. And I have all the interest in the how, or, how is this possible?
Right. Yeah,
a good example is, I thought this was a good discussion, Glenn, when you posted that, can you have a $5 million practice, single location, 9 employees? I approached that. There's a whole bunch of reasons why we really wouldn't want to do that, right? We can list yourself included, myself included, and a whole lot of other people, why you wouldn't want to go that route, right?
Why am I uncomfortable? Why does it make me uncomfortable to think about having a $5 million a year practice and only 9 employees, right?
So for some people, even thinking about it makes them uncomfortable, right? But
right. But that's the question you're asking.
I also saw a lot of comments on, or for reasons why you wouldn't want to go that direction, right? And so what I did is I took that question as a challenge to see, can I figure this out? How would I approach this, right? If this was something I wanted to accomplish, could I figure out the way? And I had never done that kind of math in that kind of way for that reason ever before. And I was like, let me record it, post it. Maybe somebody will get something out of it. Now,
we did, by the way.
Really?
We got a lot of, it was great. Your response was amazing. And for people listening, if you're part of the Orthopreneurs Facebook group, go in there and just do a search. Type in Nicole Wax, and you'll see all of her posts. And you'll see her responses. Go look at it, because it was long. Yeah. It was an amazing, such a well thought out. And that's what I love about you, is you were willing to respond, but not with a 1 sentence or 2 sentence. You spent time thinking about it for the benefit of others, and I love that.
Well, that's exactly why I do it. I do it for the benefit of others. Now, it does open yourself up when you're out there. We know in our own practices, in our own communities, in business, and on social media, when you put yourself out there, and whatever your intention is, and mine is always to be helpful and encouraging, it does open yourself up to opposing opinions and ideas, right? And so those are good to consider too. However, the exercise and the purpose, when I think it's important to say, what am I trying to get at? Because you can go down a whole bunch of different roads and whatnot and paths. But if you know what you're trying to answer or solve for, that keeps you really focused. And that's what I was doing. I was trying to answer your question.
And you did a great job with it. Yeah. You did an amazing job with it. It's a long time coming, because we started, 5 minutes ago. But let's start, so to speak, with tell everybody a little bit about you. Like, how did you end up becoming ortho? How did you end up where you are now?
When I was in middle school, I sat down at my mom's kitchen table and I wanted to figure out, what do I want to be when I get older?
That's awesome.
And there were,
You're a little kid and you're sitting there figuring out your life plan.
seriously, same kitchen table, same house my mom still lives in, 3 minutes from
Oh,
where I live now. So the top three things on that list was interior design, because I liked how things looked and I noticed that kind of thing. Third grade teacher, because I loved my experience as in third grade, and I naturally am a teacher. Even back then, I loved playing teacher and whatnot. And I love kids. And then also orthodontics, because of my own experience with my teeth and all of that. And then ultimately I landed on orthodontics, and I went to college, undergrad, dental, all of that, knowing that I was going to be an orthodontist. And I find this really fascinating. This is fate. This is God. I don't know what it is, but it was great. First of all, if I didn't go to college knowing what I wanted to do, like a lot of young people nowadays, so I can kind of relate in that some of their challenges, but I would not have, because I'm not naturally an A+ student, like a lot of the people in our field, right?
right.
That I viewed as a disadvantage back then, because I had to work really hard. And if I didn't know ultimately where I was going, I wouldn't have known, oh, I need to study more. I need to work harder to get the A's and the grades, because it didn't come natural. So I developed those kind of skills in undergrad, thankfully, right? Because I knew where I was going. If you don't know where you're going, what's pushing you, what's driving you? So we see that nowadays, of course. But the other very interesting thing, I'd be curious if any other orthodontist listening to this podcast has had this experience. When I was in dental school, first of all, I didn't believe that I could be top 10, which is obviously the kind of the gold standard, right? So I said, you know what, fine. I'm going to be top 20. That's my goal. And I'm going to look amazing and beef up my resume in these other ways. Well, I ended up graduating 7 because of my work ethic, not because I was any smarter, of course, than anybody else. And I was the only one in my dental class that went to applied for ortho. That is unheard of.
The only one?
Yes, the only one. I don't know
Wow.
what that means or whatnot, but I thought that was just kind of interesting.
That is kind of amazing.
I know.
That is kind of amazing. And so nowadays you find yourself with how many practices?
Yep. I opened from scratch right out of residency. That was not my original intention. I thought I would work with somebody, buy in, then buy out, kind of that was standard back then. But no one was really looking. Once I decided I wanted to be home, no one was really looking to bring me on full time at that time. So I worked elsewhere as an associate, and I started my practice in my hometown, having no idea what I was getting myself into. Like a lot of us, I had no dentists in my family, no business owners in my family. I was just optimistic that I could figure it out as I went. And thank goodness I didn't know what was coming, because it could have scared, my 10-year younger self away from it. But I did understand or recognize or figure out the challenges that would come from starting a practice in a very small town, 5,000 people. And the next town over has 10,000 people. I listed out all the challenges. What are all the hard things that are, going to come my way to growing this practice? My intention was to continue to be small. I thought I was going to be a small boutique practice in my hometown. That was my only ambition, but I didn't want to fail. But the exercise of writing out all these challenges, like getting patients in the door, like getting enough patients in the door in a small town, like things like that, helped me because it created a plan. It was the best plan I could come up with at that time. It was never a reason not to do it. It was always just a reason to be motivated towards finding the goal, the solution to those items on that list. So anyways, open my practice. I didn't answer your question. Sorry, Glenn.
It's okay. I'm listening.
Open my practice, 2 chairs, plumbed for 3, quickly outgrew the 2 chairs, added the third, I think within 6 months or something. Outgrew that space. Luckily, I had 1,000 square feet to bump out into. I did that. And then a year later, I built across the street. And then a year later, I bought a retiring office. And then a year later, I opened another from scratch. So 2 de novos in an acquisition, and a whole lot to learn from each one of those journeys.
You and I had the opportunity to connect about a few things before we record. I always do that with folks. And some of the things you talked about were just absolutely astounding. And I want to save a couple of them for later. But one of the things you did talk about that it really speaks to me a great deal is you mentioned just offhand, and I don't know if I learned, and we'll talk about what you learned about yourself later. It's kind of like one of those things you want to put the bow on the present at the end. And I think that it'll be great. But you weren't shy about talking about therapy and coaching and things like that. And I've been an outspoken proponent of that. Everybody should have three things in their life. You need to find a mentor to help you grow. You need to go for some form of therapy at some point, because while you think you're okay, if you think you're okay, you are probably the one who needs it the most, right? Because the ones who need it the most are the ones who think they're fine. And a coach. And all three play different roles in people's lives. You talk to me about therapy and coaching. Talk to me a little bit, if you're okay with it, sharing a little bit about, what the role a coach or a therapist plays in your life. And how does, in your opinion, does one decide when one is right, when the other is right, when you need both, when you don't need either? What are your thoughts?
I shared that with you because I know you're so open to talking about it. So that just fosters an environment where people are going to open up about those things. And I think that's, why it's important to talk about these things, because some people really could benefit from it. Likely everyone could benefit from it. But of course,
Agreed.
this journey is unique to everybody. Some people may choose to go to therapy or whatnot when things are really, really bad, when they are broken, when it's like, I don't know where to turn. I need somebody, and that somebody is a therapist.
And by the way, I'm just interrupting for a split second. The best advice, I knew a guy when I was in Seattle. I was young. I was 30 years old, 32 years old. And I remember I went out to dinner with a guy who was probably 25 years older than me, going through a nasty divorce. And, it was a really dark moment in his life. And I said, I didn't want to ever feel the way this guy was feeling. And I just said to him, what advice would you give me? And the best advice I've arguably ever gotten in my life was, go for therapy, both personally and couples, when things are amazing. And I've never been bashful about saying that I love therapy. There are times I turn it off for a while because it just might create some issues, but sometimes I love it. But what you just said, right? Don't go when you're broken, because people think, oh, I'm going to go take my car in when it breaks only. We're not going to change the oil. We're not going to fill it with gas. Not going to deal with the power steering fluid. We're just going to bring it when it breaks. And it ends up costing you so much more, and you don't necessarily fix and get back to the same car.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry for interrupting, but when you said people go just when they're broken and you were not in favor of that, I agree 1,000%.
But everybody's motivation to get in is going to be different. And
Yeah.
for some people, they have to completely break to get in there. And that's okay. But I think what they're going to find is, wow, I wish I would have done this a long time ago. Right. So I think therapy and coaching and they can be interchanged. I like to use the word coaching because really it's like a life coach is pretty much the same thing as a therapist in my eyes. But then I've also had business coaches and things like that. But as far as personal therapy or coaching, I think that one, if you've never done it, it's recognize that the first person you call might not be your person. So you might have to really search for the right person that vibes or, you vibe with and you feel comfortable opening up and you like the feedback they're giving. Secondly, the therapist or coach that you're using for your personal self might be different than who you and your spouse or, significant other needs. And I've done both. Me and my husband have had, therapy together. We've had therapy separate. We've had therapy separate for our together issues. We've had therapy separate for our separate issues. All of those things. Yeah. And then things get really good, and you're practicing it, and you're just in the groove of life. And that's when you should continue going. That's
Right.
also easy to back off at that point too. But you're absolutely right. If you are somebody that truly believes you're never as good as you could be and you're always looking for ways to be better, then therapy and coaching is the way to go. Same thing in our businesses. And I know more, and I'm probably more equipped to talk about the business side of things because that's where I have most of my experience. And I focus on the most is how to improve our business and how to improve ourselves for other people within our business. And that's where I've had so many different coaches throughout the years come in, and I know what the equation for me is as far as when do I look for the next person and who am I looking for. But I think that is critical in growing any business. And I say business because the practice is a business. The customer is unique in the sense that it is a patient, but I own other businesses, and that's just kind of the hat I naturally wear. I am a CEO of any business that I'm a part of, whether somebody else is bringing me in to talk about their business. I am just naturally like a CEO, the way I think about things. And so same with our practices.
Hey everybody, tickets for Summit 2025 are on sale now. Take a listen to what some of the attendees from Summit 2024 had to say.
This is one of the most unique, most impactful meetings that you can go to as an orthodontist.
It has everything compared to other meetings: entertainment, the content in the meeting, the speakers, the food.
I learned a lot. It helps the practice, so it really kind of checks all the boxes.
You hope to get something out of it that is going to pay dividends for years to come.
Definitely return on your investment.
We take back a lot to our office.
You get information that you probably don't get easily at any other meeting.
One of the greatest lessons I've learned in my life, and you just broached it a bit, is just whenever anything is going wrong in my life, whenever I have a relationship issue, like you said, we're out there a lot, you and I. We post a lot, and there's a lot of room for arrows to come at you. You know, I've really focused on, at first, looking at myself, like you just said, right? Like maybe it's me, it's not them. It took me a long time to get there, a lot of gray hair, to recognize that, you know, when there's a problem in a relationship, don't immediately look at the other person and see, oh, look what they did to me. How can they do that? It could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be a neighbor, a friend, an employee. How could they do this? Why do they do this way? And then we build ourselves up into this toxic, negative mind space. Nothing good grows in a negative mind space. And so if you reverse that and go, something didn't work out the way I wanted, or somebody said something or was nasty or mean, look inward and say first to yourself, you know, hey, what could I do better? How do I become a better person? How do I, you know, look at this in a different, how do I give some grace, as my partner, Doug Shaw, is so good at doing? You know, how do I give some grace here on this one and try to maybe see it from their perspective? And doing so has really allowed me to become a better person, hopefully. But more importantly, by doing that first and sort of checking in with myself, it allows me the opportunity to really, if the answer is no, I really have done everything I can do. And I mean that in my heart, not like, yeah, I've done everything I can. But like, look, you know what I'm talking about, getting inside your headspace and going, I've done this. I don't know what other door to turn. Then maybe it isn't you. Maybe it is the other person, which allows you a much more powerful way of saying, you know what? I can tune this out. I don't need this. I don't need this to upset me, because this isn't me. This is somebody else. And I've tried to learn from it. And you hit the nail on the head when you said, work on yourself so much more.
You know, Glenn, when you talk about kind of that growth that you've had as a leader or a person in looking inward and saying, what could I have done differently in this situation to have a better outcome? I think, at least for me, that was a learned trait or a learned practice as a leader. And I think what is helpful is it is hard to say, not see what the other person's doing wrong, you know, because we're always, you know, you've heard this, we're always judging ourselves by our intentions, but other people by their actions, right? So something that was really helpful for me in my leadership were a couple things. One, the things I learned about sales in the new patient exam. About sales. So
Okay.
There's a 4-step sales process that we cover, and I could talk to you about 4 hours about this, and we won't, but it's the greeting, the discovery, the presentation, and the close. The discovery portion of that process of asking questions, understanding why the patient's there, what they want, and asking the right questions to understand all the reasons they might not start that day so that you can offer them all the solutions, okay? That piece right there, question asking, being the best question asker. I took that and adopted it to my leadership style. So when something isn't going great, or I have to have a conversation with somebody and I can tell, or I understand that like I might have a different viewpoint on this than that person, I go right to discovery before I share, which is hard for us to do. We are in decision-making mindset all day long. We are the solution providers in our practice. We're wired that way. A lot of us are wired that way. So it is a very different mindset, and you have to be very intentional about it. When you are approaching a problem that you think you know the solution, but you can't just offer it because the person receiving it is not going to actually receive it. Okay, and run with it and then implement. So I go to discovery. I'm asking a lot of questions. All right, I hear what you said. Tell me more about that. Why do you think that's the right way? Why does that make you feel this way? What do you think the solution would be? Okay, if we can't do that because of these reasons, what else could you do? And so let me pause that for a second, then I'm going to go back. What that really is called is autonomy. right? We've all heard staff want autonomy, especially the younger generation. They want autonomy in their workplace, meaning they want to be able to make decisions, as many decisions as possible. They want to create their style of work uniquely to them as best they can, right? And there's some limitations, obviously, in our practices. But only recently, and I've always been aware of that and everything, but only recently did I truly understand what that meant and my role in it and how I can implement it. I thought I was doing a good job until more recently. I was like, oh, yeah, I was at like 50%. Now I'm at whatever, 80%. I know I can go up from there. So when you are addressing a conflict or a conversation or a touchy subject with an employee or a team member or even a colleague, approach it with questions. Your job is to not think about the solution in that moment, but to think about the best question to ask to understand better and get more information. And then you both will come up with a solution together, or they'll come up with a solution. And you're like, wow, you just made my life easy, right? So we all know when staff members come to us or team members come to us and they have the solution, but do we all know how to help them be an employee that is somebody who comes up with solutions? No, we don't often talk about that.
No.
But what we're saying right now is how you get there.
And can I interrupt for just a second?
Please.
So Joe Hirsch was, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was number 4 on all the podcasts I've ever done in terms of date, right? I think we did it. I think we did his first podcast as the 4th podcast I ever did for Orthopreneurs podcast. And he wrote a book called The Feedback Fix. He'll be speaking at this year's summit on the cruise. And he followed Deloitte and Touche's executive training program back in the day to see how they trained and how they gave feedback. And he did it for like a year. And he learned how to give feedback. And he said literally almost exactly what you just said, which was there's some subtle differences in terms of the beginning of it. Right. And you did a great job of talking about a book I love called the QBQ, Question Behind the Question. Right. There's a problem. It brings up a question, but what's the real question you should be asking? Mm-hmm. Right. I'm not a very good, what's the right word? I'm not good at figuring out the question to ask sometimes on the deep sort of critical thinking side of things. And I needed that book to help me better understand it. But his second part is, you have to explain to them what the problem is, right? His way of doing it is explain what the problem is, why it's a problem at all, and what happens when it's not being done properly, and then explain in no uncertain terms what occurred. Hey, Nicole, when we have a podcast that goes really, really well, everybody loves listening, it gives them great information, and it's a really wonderful experience. However, when someone decides they don't want to talk on the podcast, let's assume you don't want to talk, when somebody doesn't want to talk on the podcast, it really creates an issue because of blah, 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 blah. How do you feel we can best solve this together? Boom. That's his way of doing it. Make them a part of the solution, and again, all too often we tell them what we want them to do. And do you think you can do that? Okay, excellent, great. As opposed to letting them buy into it exactly the way you're describing. So kudos to you for figuring this one out, Nicole. You're like an empath.
Well, I'm not naturally. I've worked on it a lot. That's why. I've recognized that as something, not that I want to work on, but that I need to work on because that's required to be the best leader to the people on my team. That's why. So a couple things. I want to give an example that happens to every single one of us in our practices all of the time, which is we tell our teams, we roll out something new or we address a problem. We say, this is what we expect of you. This is how we want it done, whatever. And some people follow through. And for others, it seems to always go in one ear and out the other. I'm sure I'm not the only one that experiences that, right?
Right.
So you said I'm an empath. And I said, I'm not naturally. I looked at that situation. Now, myself 10 years ago would have been like, gosh, like, where's their work ethic? And they're the issue because of all these things.
And how much am I paying them? Look how much I'm paying them.
But the problem is that doesn't help us at all. And the only person that can address or improve or figure out how to help a team, because I could get rid of my entire team and get a new team in, and guess what? I'm going to have the same issues. It is not person specific. So I said, all right, let me rewire my brain here. I'm a problem solver. This is a repetitive problem. So when something, you see it over and over again, it's like, okay, this deserves my time and attention.
Right.
And it could make a big difference in a positive way in my practice. So I said, what can I do differently? If they're not going to do anything differently, what can I do differently? And that's when I figured out how to just be a better leader, ask the questions, right? And I saw it play out for the very first time in the best way I ever had just earlier this week. And I want to share it because I know other people will benefit or gain from this with their teams. Okay, so if you list out all the things, for example, in your clinic that you're seeing operate in a way that isn't as good as you know it could be, if everyone just did what you told them to do in the way and all of that, it would be so much better, right? And you have told your team millions of times how to do it the way you want, and they still don't follow through always.
Right.
It's inconsistent. So I wrote down all of those things, which we probably have the same list. And I just kept it to myself. And I said, clinic, we're having a powwow. And I called it a powwow. I didn't call it a meeting or anything like that. I called it a powwow. And they were a little surprised when I said, we are pushing these chairs aside and we're all sitting on the floor. No one's going to be higher than the other. No one's going to be in the lead of the table. We're sitting in a circle cross-legged and we're all participating and we're all contributing to the topic. And here is what the intention of this meeting is. The intention of this meeting is to talk about all the things we feel could be better as far as this is just the clinic team. And then we're going to make agreements and decisions on how we're going to fix those things. But we aren't going to make any decisions unless there's a unanimous vote and everyone has to participate. So I had my list. I came prepared. I always come prepared to meetings. That's my job. I got to lead, right? I had my list to prompt conversation, whatever. But by the end of the first hour of this powwow, and we only had an hour this day, they had identified all the problems I had identified, plus a few more.
Wow.
And I was like, great. And out of that problem list, we had some time to talk about solutions. We kind of threw them on the idea board. I took notes, whatever. And ultimately, we came to a unanimous decision that they figured out themselves on how we were going to move forward in some of those areas. And the areas that we hadn't had a time to really deep dive into, all the details of that and agree, we held it off for the next meeting. So the solutions that they did come up with, I knew those were the solutions. And my old self would have said, here's the problem, here's what we're going to do, and this is why we're going to do it. I even added the why every time, right? It still didn't work. But because I was a facilitator in this meeting, not a dictator, I was a facilitator of this meeting. And they were the ones coming up with the ideas. It stuck, okay? So then a week later, I said, let's continue the conversation. Now, you guys had some great ideas about, for example, here's an example, our lab having too many retainers to make in one day. What are we going to do? One of the suggestions made, well, let's just do one retainer. We always do a backup retainer. I want everyone to have a backup. They get 2 sets of retainers, and then they call us when you need us. The solution they offered was just give one retainer and we can deliver the other one later. In that moment, I wasn't going to list out all the reasons why that's a bad idea. A second appointment, keeping models, like all of that stuff, right? But I said, listen, so next day comes, we have the meeting. I said, we have our list of problems. Let's keep moving through solutions. And I said, this was one of the ideas. Let's talk about what could come up from this. And then I said, we have to consider the fact that it's going to add another appointment. This is why you don't want to do that. Just gave them information. I said, so do you guys still think that's the way to go? And they said, no. I said, me neither. And so we came up with a different solution, right? Like you don't need same day delivery of retainers with Invisalign delivers, which by the way, they created their own mess there. But they found their way through it. They found their way through it. By the end of that second powwow, everyone was talking. They came up with the ideas and we unanimously voted on the solutions for every single item, which were probably about 15, except one. There was one that they weren't understanding what I was saying. They weren't understanding the information I was giving them to kind of consider. And I said, let's table this for now. I have never done that before. I'm like, listen, we don't have more time. I'm getting this done today. I'm not going to schedule another meeting for this. We got to move on. So this is what we're going to do. Done, right? That's how I would have handled it before. of course, not with that tone, but
No.
I said, you know what, let's table it. We made an agreement that we're only going to move forward once we unanimously agree. So let's just wait. We got all of this good stuff. Let's, we'll come back to this one thing. That was at lunchtime. They rocked out all of those solutions. They implemented it immediately. That rarely happens. And then at the end of the day, all the clinic girls were in a room looking at the next day's schedule. They've never done that. And especially when they weren't asked to, and especially with no doctor or lead in the room. I've never seen this. So I'm going to be practicing that more and see if it continues to work out that way.
Well, it goes to show that leadership and positivity and empowerment and involvement. I mean, you could list one after another of all the things that were done right in that case. Whereas right now, there are many of us, and I'll include myself as part of this list. Crap, my team isn't doing this. Why aren't they doing this? If only we could do this, then everything would be great. And it goes back to the conversation you and I had a little earlier. Let's look in the mirror first, right? And when you said it earlier, I wanted to quote the Stephen Coveyism, right? The seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all too often we're folks who came out of school, did okay, been told our whole lives how great we were doing one thing or another, right? Because if I sit in a room with orthodontists, I feel like the least accomplished person in the room, right? This one speaks 8 languages. This one did mission work for 17 years. This one invented 17 bracket types. This one can finish a class 2 case in 3 months. It's like, I look at all these things and I'm like, geez, I'm just like an average dude.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not average. We're as a group, we generally are pretty good achievers. But what you're describing is so great, so amazing. And it leads to beautifully into the next topic I want to talk about, which is the thing you found out through coaching and through therapy. Because as we start, slowing down on time here a little bit, all the things we talk about doing and we achieve and do. And my recent interview with Alfred Jackson, he pointed out there's also this incredible value in saying don't do, right? Like it's okay to say no, because saying no to something means saying yes to something means saying no to something else. And again, this is such a great dovetail into this incredible message. If there's nothing anybody takes away from this entire podcast interview, it's what I think we're going to talk about right now, which is the one thing that you learned, the biggest thing you learned through your coaching and just life. Mm-hmm. What is it? Talk about it, please.
I will talk about it. But before I tell you what it is, I'm going to tell you how I got there. So I think when you talk about, making sure you're saying no, you got to say no sometimes when it doesn't make sense. To a lot of people, when you hear that, and I've heard that many of times, you don't know, well, how do I say no? Everything's helpful. I like to help people, so let me just say yes, right?
Right.
So for me, understanding what I should be doing and maybe what I shouldn't be doing was created by, or more apparent to me, when I discovered my purpose. I discovered it because of 2 questions that were asked of me at different times. So I had a marketing team or a team of videographers that I worked with a lot years ago. And one of the guys in the middle of filming for an event we were doing said, off camera, he said, why are you the way you are? Like, why do you do what you do? Why are you passionate about these things? I said, oh gosh, I don't know. This is just how I am. I don't know why. And I really took a lot of time, like that stuck in my head, to figure out, why am I the way I am? Not why do I like to do charity events? Why do I whatever? It was, why am I the way I am? And it took me down.
Not why you do it.
Yes.
But what causes you to want to do it.
Yes.
How did you get there?
And so that took me down a thoughtful journey all the way from my childhood to today. And what I discovered through thinking about that is I was an underdog. I never considered myself that or would describe it like that. But looking back, I was an underdog. What I mean by that is nothing was handed to me. I did not grow up with money. I had a single mom. We had 3 bedrooms for 7 people in this very, very small home. Nothing was handed to me. I didn't have a lot of role models other than my mom just being a complete angel on earth. But, as far as like business and ambition and things like that, I didn't have role models. And in fact, I had a lot of things around me that I could have gone down the wrong path, right? And that has created a major part of who I am and why I do what I do, because I root for underdogs. The second thing was when the pastor of my church said, what is your purpose? And he wrote a book, Pain, Passion, Proficiency, and how those three things come together to define your purpose, your God-given purpose. And again, like your assignment of, can you have a $5 million practice, single location, 9 employees? I took his question as a test to me. Can I figure this out? Anytime you challenge yourself in a new way, you're going to learn something and be better for it. So that's why I take those opportunities seriously.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, what pains me? It's the weirdest thing. And this is unique to me. A lot of people, orphans pain them, starving children, animal cruelty, and all of those things get me, sad. But the thing that pains me the most is when people have potential, they have a capability of doing something and they're not doing it. I've seen this a lot growing up with people around me, even family members, and it really bothers me. Okay. The most capable, smartest people just not applying themselves or believing in themselves to be able to reach whatever goals they have or even dream about goals. Passion, helping people, teaching. I love to teach. We talked about that. Proficiency. What are you just naturally good at? You don't even have to try. And at first I'm like, oh God, I don't know. I feel like I try hard at everything. What am I naturally good at? I'm naturally good at speaking up when no one else will. Saying the things that should be said that other people might be thinking that no one else is going to say. And that's just a natural ability. And I'm writing all these things down. I would have never thought of that if I didn't do this exercise. And all of it came together. And I was like, oh, that's my purpose, to help people and business reach their fullest potential. And I focus on confidence and self-confidence, because if you don't believe in yourself, there's no chance you're going to dream, you're going to take action, nothing. You're going to feel like you're helpless. And what's more powerful to feel like you can dictate and control everything in your life? Same thing with the leadership stuff we talked about. Like, if we're constantly like our team, our staff, them, they, this, whatever, we're powerless. But if we say, what can I do in this moment to help? I can't control any of that, but what can I do? You take the power back and the control back. And it's it gives you more confidence because you're in control. So all of that, I believe, led to, what was your question? The greatest thing I discovered?
Well, I know there's a word that you
I'm going to
used
say
earlier.
it. And that was the question though, right?
It was. It was.
All of that led me to the first time in my life finding contentment.
That's the word.
Contentment. I am a person that's highly ambitious, very motivated. I got a million ideas. I want to accomplish it all. I feel like I could. I just haven't gotten there yet. All of this stuff.
And something you said to me beforehand, which really hit me hard, because we know people like this, or we are people like this. When you saw a bird, your husband was pointing at a bird. You mind mentioning that one? Because I love that.
So I love my home, and my entire living room wall is glass, and you oversee a beautiful lake. Okay. And every time I would look out the window, every time my husband would look out the window, he would mention like, oh, I love the flowers. And especially he loves the birds. He's always commenting on the birds. And I don't.
You can tell how much Nicole loves birds.
I don't care about birds, but I've learned, again, through therapy, if he cares about birds, I should show interest and ask questions about birds. So I ask more questions about birds now. But at the moment he was looking out the window, I was looking out the window thinking things like, our doc's not done. Who's scheduling that? Why isn't it done? Gosh, we can't get to everything. And then thinking about the list of things that need to get done, because I'm wired that way. I'm wired to do more, be better. It's just how I am. But that is not a very peaceful place to live.
No, it is not.
Only recently in my life do I now look out my window and appreciate what I'm seeing, despite the dock needing boards changed out. And that is a really nice place to live. And I equate that to me understanding my purpose and that being so clear to me.
It's beautiful. And again, I think, it's interesting because you get to a certain age and you're not there yet. Once you leave your 20s, Nicole, you'll appreciate, once you hit your 30s and then beyond, when you become 31, 32.
Okay, Glenn, I love you right now. Do you think I'm in my 20s?
Absolutely, Nicole. No doubt. You graduated ortho residency at 19. Of course, you're 20, you're 29. I've been married 30 years for a really good reason.
Good job.
But I always joke that every one of my gray hairs in my beard is a mistake I've made or a lesson I've learned. And I think by times 10, right? Like 10 for every one gray hair. And It took me a very, very long time to realize that the whole nature versus nurture thing, I'm married to an amazing woman, love of my life. We celebrated our 30th the other day, and I posted on Facebook. I just said, and I mean it. I fall in love with her every time I look at her.
No.
Every time I look at this woman, I fall madly in love. The same way the first time I saw her. But we're two totally different people. And I won't get into her psyche. I'll just explain to you that it took me years to realize that we're born a certain way with gifts and I don't want to use the word detriments, but challenges.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize until my 50s, it was probably 5-6 years ago, I learned this, that I just don't worry. Like, how you think about something or you learn something or you memorize something and you think the whole world memorizes it the same way you memorize it. You may sing a song or you may have a photographic memory, but you think the whole world does it the way you do it because you have no way of seeing how somebody else memorizes. And I just don't ever worry. Like, worry is just not part of my vocabulary. The dock needs fixing. Okay, the boards need to be fixed and it'll get done. We'll solve it. And I compartmentalize it. I've been told it's my superpower by my therapist. And I looked at her and I said, everybody's not built like this. She goes, if everybody was built like that, Glenn, I wouldn't have a practice. And so I realized, it took me late to the game to realize that people do see the doc needs the boards and how are we going to do this? And when is it going to get done? And how am I going to call? But I'm so busy this week. How am I going to do? I can't do it this week. Oh my God, I got so many. And then they melt down and they have anxiety and they have depression and they have all these things. And I think the first thing I'm getting at is I think it's okay to recognize how we're built, right? We are built with predispositions towards angst, worry, or not. And recognizing that in yourself is such a huge thing. Just like they always say, like, I used to work with a lot of alcoholics and I used to do a lot of dentistry for Halfway House. And I met a lot of folks with substance abuse issues. And every one of them said the way they started getting better is they had to lose everything, everything. Not one of them ever sought treatment until they'd lost everything they owned in relationships, in money, in everything. And if we wait to do what they did, which is to recognize the problem until all of our relationships are toxic or we're not living our best life, that's a problem.
Yep.
And I encourage everybody here to do what you did, which is really to ask the question, why do I look at the dock and not appreciate being here in this minute? Why am I not looking at that sunset and taking a picture of that in my head and looking at the dock and the water and the birds and my husband and taking in all the things around me that I truly, genuinely appreciate and love in this minute, right now? I'm not taking out my camera to take a picture of it. I'm doing it in my head because this is a moment I never want to forget. And I think all too often, not enough people do that. I think today's generation, which you were referring to, I think the camera comes first. I'm going to get a picture of the sunset. I'm going to get a picture. Stop, put the phone down and just be in the moment, which is really what contentment is. Yeah. Contentment is recognizing the beauty, the appreciation, the love of whatever that thing is in front of you that you're thinking of. That's contentment, right? Not wishing it were, right? I have a husband. I don't have a husband. Not that you judge, but you have a husband. He likes birds. You don't like birds. You say nice things. It's wonderful. But you have a husband you love who loves you. You're the love of his life. He's the love of yours. And that alone is a moment to stop and say, God, how lucky I am. I have my soulmate. This is amazing. And yes, I'm pissed off right now about something that he did. But how lucky am I? And once we start making that turn in our lives, oh my gosh, life changes, right?
I teach all the things that I needed to be taught at some point. All the things I talk about are things that I needed to be taught or that I learned along the way. And when you first can recognize the things that you're not good at or that really hold you back, as well as your strengths. But contentment came to me because, one, I understood my passion and my purpose, and I was living it out, and I was making decisions based on that very solid foundation. But also it came when I consciously practiced gratitude. Otherwise stated for me, when I consciously controlled my thoughts. Because I think human nature is to worry, is to think about the negative or, mention the negative. It's so much more powerful than the positive in the world today, right? But when you practice like a thought of, I'll just use my doc. My doc's not done. And you say, stop it, Nicole, stop it. Yes, you care about that. push that out, right? I'm grateful. Look at, I'm in a dream that I used to have. I've achieved something that I'm not recognizing here. And you kind of expand the time frame that you're even thinking about in that moment. That is how I came to be content. And it came at the wonderful time because now I'm a mom of 3. I have an 8-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and an almost 1-year-old. And for the first time in my life, I never thought I could find this, by the way. I heard people talk about it. I'm like, okay, great. Well, how, right? I like to know the how, the why and the how. And we don't often talk about those things a lot. But I never thought I would find that moment where you're home with the kids and you're present, being present in any moment, but especially with your children. I never thought that would come to me. I always thought I would be working towards that. Thank God it came. So contentment came with just being present with my children. When I'm home with my kids, I'm pretty much just thinking and focusing on them. And I'm so grateful for that.
It's beautiful. And again, we could do this for days. Your message resonates so deeply with me. The intentionality with which you lead your life is so beautiful. And, before I say goodbye to you, I'm going to tell everybody, take a lesson from what Nicole just said. Gratitude, right? I tried a gratitude journal, didn't work for me. We all have our own way. But you know what does work for me? Picking up my phone and sending a text to 2 people, just 2 people, 1 person if need be. And don't just mail it in, folks. Send somebody a text or a message, an email, a message on Facebook or Instagram, wherever you want to do it, just thanking them for something, right? Thanking them for something that they've done, and spell out exactly what you're thankful for them. You can say to somebody, thank you so much for being in my life. I really appreciate you. You're amazing, Nicole. And that's wonderful. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if I said to you, hey, Nicole, thank you so much for being in my life. Your gratitude message made such a difference in my life because I went out that day and I said something to somebody and it changed their life and blah, 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 blah. And as a result, I was on cloud 9 the rest of the day because I did that, right? Just write somebody a gratitude message like that and watch how the rest of your day. And to as I close this out, I'll quote the amazing late, great captain of the Sioux City, Iowa crash flight. I got to see him speak twice, Denny Fitch. He's amazing, his story. And he has a saying that they say in the cockpit in an emergency, and it's attitude affects altitude, right? And there's a whole bunch of jokes in there about attitude, a plane's attitude. But your attitude affects altitude. They know that the more positive you are, the more likely you are to keep that aircraft in the air for longer, period. So take that as your mantra here is attitude affects altitude. Because if you're having a crappy day when you get to the office, Nicole, you willing to bet what kind of day they're going to have in the office?
Crappy day.
And again, when your leader is Nicole Wax and she comes in with the idea of gratitude on her mind, you guys want to guess what kind of day she has? Do you want to guess whether her practice is going to grow or shrink? Do you want to guess whether her team members are going to stay or leave, generally speaking? Lead by example and start with happiness and positivity and gratitude. And that's what I'm so thankful for you, Nicole, because every time I talk to you, I leave with a smile on my face and a more positive attitude in this world and just wanting to double down on my goal of trying to make the world a better place. So I want to say thank you to you from the bottom of my heart.
I feel the same way about you. And you just blessed me with that message and this opportunity. And I think all of us on Monday morning, no matter what day we're having, walk around to our teams and compliment as many people as you can, even if it's a day that you really don't have anything to compliment on, find something and it will shift it. It will shift it. It's powerful.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Wishing you a great day. Can't wait to see you whenever that may be, however that may be. I just can't wait to see you. And more importantly, just give you a big hug because you really, truly, genuinely are one of my favorite people on the planet, even when I'm laughing, because even when you're running with a bag over your shoulder and a coffee in your hand, it is, I love you so much, Nicole. You're amazing.
Thank
And so
you.
thank you for being who you are.
Thanks for loving me for who I am.